How do I get this out? I can never remember how to get this out. This thing. Oh, minimize. Great. Okay. We're doing Persephone. Oops. Need to get back to the beginning here. Or Persephone. There she is. Just want to make sure that I am recording. Yep, I'm recording. Okay, so we're going to talk about Persephone today. Who is Persephone? Persephone is Demeter's daughter. If you remember from last time, we talked about Demeter. She's the mother archetype. Persephone is the maiden archetype. And so she's just generally known as, before she goes into the underworld, she's known as a girl, a maiden. She's out walking in the flowers. She doesn't really have a sense of purpose. She's goalless. She's waiting for someone or something to kind of get her going in life. She's just being a daughter, basically, living an innocent life. And her story is within this myth called the Hymn to Demeter by Homer. And we talked a little bit about that last time, and I'll do a little bit more reading about it today. She's also known as the Roman names Prosperina or Proserpina. I always have trouble with that name, or Cora. And she's worshipped in two forms. She's worshipped as a maiden, and her name as a maiden is Kore, Kore, which means young girl. Her symbols are symbols of fertility, the pomegranate, the grain, just like her mother, corn, and the narcissus. And these are actually narcissus flowers. If you look at the artwork on the left here, that's the flower that lured her. So she's picking narcissus flowers, and Hades sees her picking flowers and brings her down into the underworld. She's also worshipped as the queen of the underworld. And when she's in this form, she's a mature goddess who reigns over the dead souls, guides the living who visit the underworld, and claims for herself what she wants. So she's totally empowered once she's gone through the change from core to the queen. She is the central figure of the Eleusinian mysteries, which are rites and rituals that the Greeks followed to celebrate the change of seasons. And so that's how they experience the return and renewal of life after death. They celebrate her, her myth, basically. Okay. Looking for my, oops. Okay, so the mythology of Persephone. This is a very grainy photo, but it was kind of the best image I could find. She's the only daughter of Demeter and Zeus. I think her mom, Demeter, was like maybe Zeus's third wife or something like that. And then they're also brother and sister, which is odd, but that's how the Greeks did it. So you can see here, Hades has captured her and is bringing her down into the underworld. So I'm going to read to you a little bit about her abduction story. So in the beginning of the Demeter-Persephone myth, Persephone was a carefree girl who gathered flowers and played with her friends. Then Hades in his chariot suddenly appeared out of a vent in the earth and took the screaming maiden by force and carried her back to the underworld to be his unwilling bride. Demeter did not accept the situation. She left Mount Olympus and persisted in seeking Persephone's return and finally forced Zeus to heed her wishes. Zeus then dispatched Hermes, the messenger god, to fetch Persephone. Hermes arrived in the underworld and found a sad, depressed Persephone. But her despair turned to joy when she found that Hermes had come for her and Hades would let her go. Before she left him, however, Hades gave her some pomegranate seeds, which she ate. Then she got into the chariot with Hermes, who took her swiftly to Demeter. After the reunited mother and daughter had joyfully embraced, Demeter anxiously inquired if she had eaten anything in the underworld. Persephone replied that she had eaten pomegranate seeds because Hades had forced her, unwillingly, violently, to eat them, which was not true. Demeter accepted the story and the cyclic pattern that followed, which means she was going to have to go back to the underworld for one part of the year and come back to her mother for the other part. Had Persephone not eaten anything, she would have been fully restored to Demeter, so she would have been able to stay with her mother. Having eaten the pomegranate seeds, however, she would now spend 1/3 of the year in the underworld with Hades and 2/3 of the year in the upper world with Demeter. Later, Persephone became queen of the underworld. Whenever the heroes or heroines of Greek mythology descended to the lower realm, Persephone was there to receive them and be their guide. None found her absent. There was never a sign on the door saying, "Gone home to mother," although the Persephone Demeter myth says she did so 2/3 of the year. In the Odyssey, which is another myth, the hero Odysseus, also known as Ulysses, journeyed to the underworld, where Persephone showed him the souls of women of legendary fame. In the myth of Psyche and Eros, Psyche's last task was to descend into the underworld with a box for Persephone to fill with beauty ointment for Aphrodite. The last of the 12 tasks of Hercules also brought him to Persephone. Hercules had to get her permission to borrow Cerberus, the ferocious three-headed guard dog, which he subdued and put on a leash. And lastly, Persephone contended against Aphrodite for the possession of Adonis, the beautiful youth who was loved by both goddesses. Aphrodite had concealed Adonis in a chest and sent him to Persephone for safekeeping. But on opening the chest, the queen of the underworld was herself charmed by his beauty and refused to give him back. Persephone now struggled with another powerful deity for possession of Adonis, as Demeter and Hades once did over her. The dispute was brought before Zeus, who decided that Adonis would spend 1/3 of the year with Persephone and 1/3 of the year with Aphrodite, and should be left to himself for the remaining time. So that's her mythology. I want to show you guys this image because I think sometimes it's a little hard to understand. Oops, sorry. It's a little hard to understand when we're talking about going into the underworld, what does that actually mean? So if you look at this image at the top, everything above the water line, is what's conscious. So the physical world, society, our ego, that's the part of us that's thinking right now, consciousness. And so the persona is basically our personality or who we are in the world. So I am a mother, I am a physical therapist, I'm a person who's kind of introverted. That's all part of my persona. Just underneath the water here, all of that is the underworld. All of it, it's the unconscious. So in the unconscious, so when Persephone goes into the underworld, when we go into the underworld, we are able to access all of these things. We can access our shadow, our personal unconscious. So whatever we have suppressed from our life that we don't want to remember, there are complexes there. Complexes are, one of them is a mother complex. So what that is all of our associations with the word mother, with the function of mother. My mother complex is formed around what I think of as mother and also my ideas and associations with my personal mother. So somebody else's mother complex would be different than mine, but there would be some similarities. There's also the collective unconscious, which has the anima and animus in it, as well as the self. The self is that Hestia part of us, the deep inner knowing. So all of that, everything below the waterline is what Persephone accesses when she goes down with Hades. He is the ruler of that world, the male ruler, or the masculine ruler. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Persephone, the archetype. So Persephone, the archetype, is not linked to the strong instinctual feelings like Hera and Demeter. If you remember, Demeter has this urge to have a baby, and Hera has this really strong urge and instinct to be married and bonded with someone. She actually does not have these kinds of strong feelings. She has very little sense of instinct. In fact, she doesn't really act, but she's acted upon. She's very receptive. She's very compliant. She's very passive. She's just someone who kind of goes along with the flow. This archetype allows a woman to seem very young, eternally youthful. So when you see someone who looks really young in the world, She could be influenced by Artemis. If you remember, Artemis also has a young look to her, or she could also be a Persephone woman. And she has these two aspects, core and the queen. And people who carry this archetype or who are engaged with this archetype can be influenced by the maiden and also the queen, one of them or both of them, but usually both. So Persephone as maiden, this archetypal pattern is representative of a young girl who doesn't really know who she is and is unaware of her strengths and desires. It's a very typical phase for women to go through before they get married, embark on a career, but some women actually remain maiden-like for their whole life. They're just sort of floating along through life and they don't make strong commitments. She is uncommitted to a relationship, to work, to an educational goal. Even if she's in a relationship or has a job or is studying in college, there's just a lack of commitment to it. And whatever it is that they're doing, it's as if it's not for real. They have what's called a puella attitude. Now, puella is a Latin word that means little girl. So just it's a young girl attitude. Indecisive, waiting for someone or something to transform their lives for them. So Persephone as mother's daughter. So this is a big part of her archetypal pattern. So this represents the common mother-daughter pattern in which the daughter is too close to a mother to develop an independent sense of herself. And the motto is mother knows best, which is, there's a song in Rapunzel that's mother knows best. You can listen to that song and, get some insight into the Demeter Persephone vibe. Persephone wants to please her mother. She wants to be a good girl, obedient, compliant, cautious. She's often sheltered and protected from experiences that carry even a little bit of risk. The mother on the surface can seem very strong and independent, but she's going to foster dependency. She's going to encourage her daughter to remain dependent on her in order to keep her daughter close. And she also may live vicariously through her. Sometimes the father is a dominating, intrusive father who makes the daughter dependent. The technical psychological term for this is emotional incest, which is kind of a loaded term, but if you want to know more about it, you can Google emotional incest. And there's this great book called When a Parent's Love Rules Your Life. And it's a fabulous book for children of parents who were too close. The culture also conditions all of us to think that femininity means being passive and being dependent. So many of us are conditioned to act like Cinderella's waiting around for a prince. You know that song, Someday My Prince Will Come from Snow White? That kind of energy. Like we can't live our own lives. We're just waiting for a man to come and start it up for us. This passivity and dependency are major problems for Persephone women because the environment that we are in, our culture, reinforces the archetypal pattern, and then other parts of us don't develop. We'll get more into that later. So Persephone has a pattern of being what's called an anima woman. So if you remember from that chart I was showing you, anima is something in the unconscious, and it's the collective image of woman. So each of us has an impression or associations of man or woman, and that is called an anima and an animus. So this Jungian analyst, M. Harding, describes a type of woman who is all things to all men. She called this kind of woman an anima woman, someone who adapts herself to her partner's wishes, makes herself beautiful in his eyes, so wears the kind of clothes that he likes, charms him, and pleases him. And she's not self-aware. She's not able to talk articulately about how she feels, what she thinks. She's usually completely unaware of her motives. So if you question her on something like, why did you do that? She will not be able to, in most cases, explain her motive. She very easily receives the projection of a man's unconscious image of woman called the anima, and she conforms to this image. So basically, anytime she's with a man, even actually when she's with women, she kind of conforms to their expectations of what a woman is supposed to be, which means that she's very like she's like chameleon like, because each person that she partners with, she'll be a different kind of person with them. Harding says she is like a many-sided crystal that turns automatically without any volition on her own part. So always the facet, the crystal part of the crystal that best reflects his idea of perfect woman is presented to him. So she's kind of a perfectionist in that way. Her innate receptivity makes her very malleable. So if someone important to her has an expectation of her or projects an image onto her, she doesn't usually resist it. It's her pattern to be like a chameleon and just try on what others expect of her. And she changes herself in every relationship that she's in. And this was absolutely me in my younger years. It was most noticeable for me, every person that I dated, whatever their hobbies were, I would also adopt those hobbies and get into them and know about and kind of study them and become fascinated with them. And so, in some ways, that's quite nice because now, as a 46-year-old woman, I have explored a lot of different things, but never in any of those relationships did I bring that partner into my world and expose them to something that I was passionate about. The focus was very much on the other person and absorbing their interests. So Persephone as a child woman, what I mean by this, a child woman, this is a young girl who looks very young, but also has that kind of girl next door, sex kitten, really sexy vibe. She's very unaware of her sexual attractiveness and beauty. She's the archetypal combination of sexuality and innocence. So some of you are too young to know this movie, but there was a movie in the late 70s and another movie in the 80s called Pretty Baby. And this actress, if you look at this image on the left, that's Brooke Shields. She's now older than me. And she was a perfect Persephone girl. She was extremely beautiful. If you Google her, she's a gorgeous girl. And she looked sexy. And she dressed like she was dressed. She did not dress herself this way, but because she was an actress, she was dressed as older women are dressed. And so in this movie, Pretty Baby, it's a movie literally about a 12-year-old growing up in a brothel. Julie is asking if this is a very submissive woman. Yes, she is very submissive. Okay. She lacks a sense of herself as a sexual person, as a sensual person. And so as long as she remains like the maiden and she doesn't grow into the queen part of her, her sexuality will be unawakened. So what that means practically is she's going to like men to like her, but she's going to retain her innocence. She's not going to be very passionate. And she's probably not going to know how to have an orgasm. It's going to be hard for her to have an orgasm. In Japanese culture, the ideal woman resembles Persephone. She's quiet, demure, compliant. She won't say no directly. She doesn't disagree. She won't rock the boat. She remains in the background and she anticipates the needs of men and outwardly accepts her fate. Oops. Okay. So Persephone as guide to the underworld. Symbolically, the underworld can represent the deeper layers of the psyche, the subconscious, and the collective unconscious. So you remember that image I showed you, it's everything underneath the water. So if you dream about the unconscious, you might find that you have images of basements, corridors, caves, rooms that look like labyrinths. Sometimes in these dreams, you might be afraid, you might be interested or awed, and that very much depends on your perspective of your own unconscious, of the unconscious. If you're afraid of that, then you're going to be frightened in these dreams. If you're interested, then you're curious about the unconscious and you don't fear it. So Persephone symbolizes the ability to move back and forth between your conscious ego-based reality of the real world, so what we see in the tangible world, and the unconscious or the archetypal reality of the psyche. So she's basically the ability to kind of understand symbolism, to think about your dreams and explore what those dreams might mean. That's a function of Persephone. So if this pattern is active, if you are a queen, then you can mediate between your awake life and your unconscious life and use both to integrate into your personality. And she can also, this pattern, if it's active in you, you can also help others, people who are going through mental illness, people who are caught in the archetypal realm. You can help them because you know your way, you've been through it. Some people have this pattern but have never been stuck there. So most Persephones feel like they are dragged down into the underworld at some time in their life, like they have excuse me, they go through a trauma and they get stuck in this depressive state. I'm going to, if I can, pause the recording and cough. Okay, I have to get this thing to go away. There we go. Okay. Some people have this pattern, like I was saying, but they've never been captive. So they're able to go into the unconscious and understand symbolism, and they're very naturally drawn to spirituality, or maybe tarot cards, for instance, or crystals, or even psychic. But they haven't gone through an incredible trauma. They never feel like they've been caught in the underworld, like they've been very depressed. They're just naturally receptive to the unconscious and just very familiar with it. So this archetype is responsible for being comfortable with symbolic, language, rituals, madness, visions, or ecstatic mystical experience. If you're someone who's very drawn to any of the items that I just mentioned, tarot cards, having a psychic reading, symbolism, myths, if you're drawn to this class, you're probably in some ways, connected to the Persephone archetype as guide. She's also a symbol of the spring. So here's a picture. If you see this artistic picture, Demeter's on the left, and she's in the upper world, and Hermes is this guy with a funny pink hat on, and that's Persephone excitedly reaching out to her mother and returning to her mother's arms. And this, in Greek tradition, represents the beginning of spring, that this young maiden is coming back to life. So Persephone is young, uncertain, and full of possibilities, just like the spring is. We don't know what will happen in the spring and summer. It's a real feeling like life is starting again. She's waiting for someone to come along and shape her life. And so this pattern can be reactivated, just like spring, after loss and depression. Every time this archetype resurfaces, it is again possible for a person with this archetype in her to be receptive, ready for new growth, youthful, vital, and receptive to change. So again, kind of like Hera and kind of like Demeter, the vulnerable goddesses, it feels a little awkward to imagine yourself cultivating being young and innocent and not all that powerful. But she has this quality to her, this receptivity, that's very important. A lot of people, Athena and Artemis types especially, who like to act decisively, they don't do well when they have a lack of clarity about what to do and what has the highest priority. But Persephone is the part of us that can wait for a situation to change or for her feelings to become clear and then act. Being open and malleable, as Persephone is also really important for Hera types. If you remember, Hera is the goddess of marriage, and she has all these expectations of like what's going to happen and how her life's going to be. And she can get kind of stuck in those expectations and then greatly disappointed and jealous and all of that. But if she can cultivate, a Hera woman can cultivate Persephone, then she can cultivate being open and a little more malleable. And Demeter is convinced that she knows best. And so learning how to cultivate receptivity, being open is very helpful to her so that she can open herself up to new possibilities. If you think you know best, unfortunately, that will shut you down to a lot of different possibilities in life. So the first thing to do is to just place a positive value on receptivity. So just having the idea that it's a good thing to be receptive is the start. And you can develop this by listening to what others have to say, trying to see through their eyes, and trying not to make critical judgments or prejudices, putting yourself in their shoes. You can also help with this by developing kindness towards yourself when you feel like nothing's happening. So if you feel like you're having an underworld phase, you just accept it as a phase that spring is going to come again. It's not forever. Not see it as a sin. Most people who are, especially Athena and Artemis types, who are like used to go, 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 or even Demeter types, who are just used to being very functional in the world, really struggle when everything slows down and when you have to kind of wait and see. So it's important to just accept that it's a phase, not something you've done wrong. That's a huge issue for me. Every time I'm slow at work, I'm like, what happened? Why? And it's just part of the cycle of life. And you can see it as a time that's important for healing and creativity and see it in a positive fashion. You can also work on cultivating your recall of dream symbols. You can write them down and think about them. That helps you to connect to the unconscious in an awake state. And you can also develop your psychic gifts by learning to be receptive to images that arise spontaneously in your mind. So now we're going to talk about Persephone the human. So remember, these archetypal patterns, we're never 100% like a god or a goddess. We're human, so we have a mix of all different kinds of archetypes. But someone who has more Persephone than other archetypes may sound something like this. She'll have a youthful quality. She may look younger than her age. She may look girlish and even act girlishly. She might have take care of me energy, wanting to be like the passenger princess and get treated to things. She will bend to conform with circumstances. So she's going, whatever way things are going, she's going to go along with it. Or if there's someone who's more assertive in her vicinity, she's going to bend to that person. And she also remains somewhat unaffected by experience, unless she makes a commitment that will change her. So if, for instance, if she decides to really pour herself into her career, then she's going to feel different. If she does not make that strong inner commitment to really put herself into her career, she's just going to sort of float through it. She goes to work, but it's not really what defines her. She doesn't allow it to define her in any way. Young Persephone is usually a quiet, good little girl, very unassuming. She likes to wear pink. She's very girly. She's usually well behaved. She wants to please others. She does what she's told. She wears what's chosen for her. She will usually have an over-giving mother. So a Demeter mom who's got all that abundance, so much love, who will make a Persephone girl who is already cautious and compliant even worse. So Demeter moms treat their Persephone daughters like little dolls that are in need of protection and supervision. They shelter her. And they are overly worrying and protective, which sends the message that any new thing is risky. Things done alone is risky or are risky. And so it's best to stay dependent. She is introverted. She is cautious by nature. She likes to observe first and then join in later. She needs to imagine herself doing something before actually doing it or before deciding that she would like to do it. She likes to watch and see. If she has an extroverted mother, that mother may misinterpret this introversion as being timid and may pressure her into doing something before she's ready. She might force her to make up her mind. And so Persephone is going to do whatever will please the other person the most. And so what she learns through these experiences is that she is going to be passive and someone else is going to be in charge. But also Persephone can learn to trust her innate receptive ways and become confident of her ability to make decisions in her own way and in her own time, if she has parents that support that. Her preferences are subjective and intuitive, but they're right for her. They're actually right. But she's going to struggle to say why because she doesn't have the ability to explain herself logically like an Athena would. So it's tough for her. You know, somebody will say, what do you want to do? And she'll say what she wants to do, but she won't be able to say why. So Persephone's parents, she's often a mommy's little girl in a Demeter-Persephone dynamic with her mom. Her Demeter mother will treat her like an extension of herself that increases or decreases her self-esteem. So if the Persephone girl is behaving well and she's following along the path that her mom has laid out for her, that makes her mom feel good about herself. And if she does something different or off course, that'll make her mom feel bad about herself. And so their psyches overlap. The mom will choose her daughter's activities as if she were mothering herself. So she's picking everything out for her, whatever she wanted or missed when she was a child, instead of considering what her daughter actually needs. She's thinking of herself, basically. A Persephone daughter will not contradict any of this, but a little Artemis or a little Athena will say, no, I don't want to wear that dress, or I don't want to do what you're telling me to do. I want to do what I want to do. But Persephone won't do that. An Athena mom of a Persephone daughter will be really frustrated and confused at her daughter's seeming indecisiveness and an inability to speak her mind. And an Artemis mom will be upset about her daughter's lack of will and inability to stand up for herself. These moms may help their daughters to develop these aspects. So Athena and Artemis moms may help their daughter to be more like them, or they may make their daughter feel very inadequate. Persephone daughters may not be close to their fathers. Sometimes it's because a Demeter mom is too possessive and kind of takes up all the space, and the father is like shut out. Or the father may have chosen to remain uninvolved or distant, or maybe focused on the boy in the family. Ideally, she would have parents that trusted her intuitive way of knowing what's important to her and trusted her conclusions. So in other words, parents that value the intuitive, introverted sense within themselves will parent their children to also value that. Persephone in adolescence and early adulthood, usually the high school experience is just like the early childhood experience with mother knowing best, shopping for her, choosing her clothes, influencing her choice of friends, interests, and dates. Sometimes this is, it's not overt always. For example, a mom could subtly give the impression that her daughter should take up the same hobbies that she had when she was young, or give her just little glances that insinuate this is not a person that you should be friends with, things like that. Adolescents really need secrets and privacy, or most do anyway. So being overly intrusive handicaps the development of a separate identity. So when a Persephone daughter shares with her mother, her mom's anxieties and opinions and values can influence her perception, her own perception. So if you go to your mom and tell her, what's going on with you, however your mother reacts to what you're sharing can influence how you feel about it. And especially for a Persephone girl who's very receptive, she may share a positive experience with her mother, and then by the end of the conversation, have a totally different opinion of that same experience. Now she thinks it's negative. That's the influence of having a stronger personality. So she may attend college, but usually she does it to meet the expectations of her parents. She usually struggles to choose a major. She may struggle getting her work done on time because she's not very confident. She lacks assertiveness. And she'll often just settle on a major by default or by following the path of least resistance. So whatever is easiest. Okay, next. Oops. Persephone at work. So she may stay a professional student, which means somebody who just keeps studying, a lifelong learner, and never actually applies what they've learned. Or she might go to work. She tends to have a series of jobs rather than a profession or a career, and she will gravitate to where her friends and family are. And she will usually move from job to job or be fired for not meeting deadlines or for taking too much time off. She does better at jobs that do not require initiative, persistence, or the ability to be a supervisor. She's not a good leader naturally. She does well if there is a boss to please who gives her specific, clear assignments with short time frames. On long assignments, she will procrastinate and act as if she expects to be rescued, or if she has unlimited time, and she'll do things very last minute, and including just staying up all night long to get something done. However, if she matures into the queen, so if she decides to accept being down in the underworld, she will likely enter a creative or psychological or spiritual field. So she might become an artist, a poet, a therapist, or even a psychic. And her work will be deeply personal and unorthodox. And she will often work in a very individualized way, so very unique, very much her. And sometimes she'll work without the proper academic degrees. So she's a little bit of a maverick. So friendships with other women. She's very comfortable with other women who are also like Persephone. She will often join a sorority. She likes trying out new things in the company of other women rather than being alone. If she's pretty, she may attract female friends who do not think of themselves as very feminine and who project their undeveloped femininity onto her and then treat her as special. So she might attract a girl or a woman who doesn't really think of herself as very girly. And then all of the girliness can be in the Persephone woman, and the non-girly one will admire her. And it gives the non-girly one this excuse to be the non-girly one, essentially. She allows all the femininity to be with the Persephone woman. Her closest friend is often a girl with a stronger personality, so someone who's more of a leader type. When I was little, I was very much a Persephone girl in a lot of ways, and I had this friend named Tara who decided everything that we would do, and I would just follow along to whatever she wanted to do. She does evoke a maternal response in peers and older women who do favors for her and look out for her. So she'll often have friends who are mother types. So this is a fascinating little area. Relationships with men. She's seen by men as a child woman, not assertive, youthful, indistinct, and trainable. Unfortunately, we've heard in the toxic masculine field on podcasts and things, they talk about wanting women who are trainable with low body counts. That's a Persephone woman. They consider her unthreatening. She'll say, let's do whatever you want to do, because she hasn't figured out what she wants to do. So she's happy to just go with the flow. There are 3 categories of men who are attracted to her. The first category are men who are just as young and experienced as her. This is just young love, exploring as equals. This is your typical first relationship in high school. Is commonly going to be between a Persephone girl and a boy who's just as much innocent and inexperienced as her. Also, there are your bad boys, your tough men who are drawn to her innocence and fragility. So she's this nice girl from a good family, and this fascinates him because she's his opposite. And she's fascinated by him because of his magnetism, his charisma, his sexual aura, and he's more dominating. And she kind of likes being swept away by someone who is going to dominate her. Men, and the third category are men who are uncomfortable with grown-up women. So sometimes a Persephone woman will have this sort of ideal patriarchal relationship with an older man. And these are the kind of women that Athena women, Artemis women look at and think, daddy issues. So she's going to fit the ideal of a soft, receptive, weak, non-assertive woman that patriarchal men look for. These men want to feel powerful, dominant, and not have their ideas or authority challenged. And Persephone will not challenge. She doesn't put up a fight. Oops. I keep going backwards instead of forwards. There we go. Some men are also looking for someone, a woman, who is not like mom. So a lot of men have an association with their mother as someone who is difficult and hard to please. So a Persephone woman is attractive to them because she's easy to please comparatively. She's not assertive. So sometimes a relationship with a man can be how Persephone will separate from her dominating mother. So she might go through a stage of being a pawn in which she is the object to be possessed in a power struggle between her partner and her mother. Sometimes she'll even unconsciously fall in love with a man that she knows inside her that her mom won't like. Could be someone from a different social class, could be someone from a different race, someone that her mother would not inherently respect. Her mother will object, be appalled by her choice and attack it, and see the man as an adversary. However, his ability to resist and stand up to her mother might be one of the reasons why Persephone is attracted to him, because she too, inside her, knows that she needs to separate from her mom, and she struggles to do that on her own. So she may attract a man who can help her do that. So at this part of the phase in the relationship, she's at odds with her mother and also with her own standards of behavior. She's no longer a good girl. She's no longer compliant. She might be forbidden to see him, and she might agree and say, okay, I won't see him, but then sneak off and see him. Or she might try to argue with her mother and get her to see the benefits of this person. After a while of this, her partner will demand that she confront her mother, or else will just give up on her and say, this is too much effort. I can't get in the middle of this. And now she's caught. She either has to go back to her mother and act the part of the compliant daughter, or she may take her chances with him and break away. If she's able to make the break, she'll begin her journey towards individuation, which is a word that means becoming yourself, becoming your real self, and becoming whole. And she can reconcile with her mother later when she has gained some emotional independence. But she needs to separate first. Persephone and sexuality. So in the phase of core or maiden, she'll be asleep or unconscious of her sexuality and sort of waiting for a prince to awaken her. And eventually, however, most Persephone women become awakened. They basically wake up and have a passionate experience with a man, and they discover that they are orgasmic, they can have an orgasm. But before this, she'll feel like a girl just pretending to be a woman. She won't feel like a real woman yet. Persephone and marriage. So marriage just seems to kind of happen to a Persephone woman. It's not like with Hera, who goes through a transformation. It just sort of happens. So she feels abducted into marriage when a man persuades her to say yes. And so she'll be sort of swept away by the romance of it, swept away by his insistence and certainty. He's very certain, so she feels like, okay, I guess I can be certain. She's also influenced by the culture. So in our culture, marriage is what every woman is supposed to do. So she's going to be influenced by that cultural pressure. She defers to the stronger person. She's receptive, not active. She's not competitive or pushy. So men choose her, not vice versa. Once she's married, she'll go through a stage of feeling like an unwilling bride and will feel resistant and resentful of her husband. And so a lot of men will say this, that they feel like they keep asking, for instance, to have sex with their wife, and constantly they're rejected. And it's because of this. The marriage may turn out to be an unsought transformative event through which the maiden becomes the married woman, or Hera, the mother, or Demeter, or the sexual woman, Aphrodite. But Persephone women who are unwilling brides only make a partial commitment. So in their soul, they're not really committed. They've agreed, but it's not a deep transformative commitment like it is for Hera. And oftentimes they'll spend their time just fantasizing about other men and other lives. Persephone as a mother won't feel authentic unless she also has Demeter in her psyche. And her own mother, if she's a very pushy, overbearing mother, may actually take over and make her feel incompetent, undermining her self-confidence. A child of hers, if she has, when she has children, who has a stronger will and more definite ideas, may tell her mother what to do. And as she grows older, may reverse roles with her dependent mother. And so children caught in this situation with a dependent Persephone mother will say, I didn't have a mother, I was the mother. If her child is also a Persephone, so two Persephones, mother as Persephone, daughter as Persephone, they may become two alike, resembling inseparable sisters. And so you can kind of see this a lot of times on, I see it a lot on TikTok and social media, where you can't even tell which one is the mother and which one is the daughter, because they look so much alike, and the mother dresses really young. Persephone moms of very strong, assertive sons may feel bullied by them, run over by them, intimidated by them. And it's really unusual and foreign for a Persephone woman to use power in a relationship. So it's very hard for her to show her children, like, who's the boss. She may give in to demands, fail to set limits, and feel impotent and victimized, powerless. Or she may find indirect ways to shift the focus. So she may charm a child into a better mood, or divert their attention, or get upset and make them feel guilty or ashamed. These are all like passive ways of parenting. Some of her children actually love having a non-intrusive mom who loves them and admires their independent spirit. So sometimes a Persephone mom or a mother with some Persephone in her can be really, really powerful for a child. She can nurture their imagination by sharing this aspect of herself, the imaginative aspect. And if she has transformed herself into the queen, she can help them understand the value of having an inner life, being in contact with the unconscious. In the middle years, although the archetype is eternally young, the woman herself is getting older and she's very distressed by aging. She may realize that her dreams have not come true, and that may bring on a midlife depression. If she stays identified with the maiden, she may work at denying reality. So having a facelift. Excuse me. There we go. I have to pause the recording and cough again. Sorry, guys, block your ears. Okay, I've skipped a slide here accidentally. Okay, so Persephone in the middle years, she might, if she's still identified with the maiden, she may have a facelift. She may wear clothes and a hairstyle that looks really young. It's more suitable to a woman who's much younger. And she may act helpless and try to be cute. And with each passing year, her behavior will be less and less appropriate. She kind of starts to look ridiculous, and depression is never far from the surface because she hasn't ever actually done anything in her life. If she's no longer identified with the maiden because she's decided to commit to something in her life or allows her experiences to change her, then she won't be depressed. In her later years, if she has matured into the queen, she may have a regal presence of a wise elder who knows the mysteries that make life and death meaningful. If she's had mystical and psychic experiences and has tapped into a source of spirituality within herself, she may not fear growing old and dying. She may retain a part of herself that stays eternally young in spirit. The worst case scenario, though, is that she won't have recovered from her depression and will remain defeated by life or withdrawn from reality, captive in her own underworld. So essentially depressed and just not functioning. So the psychological difficulties of Persephone. She can get stuck in any of the various stages of her evolution. She can get stuck identified as a maiden. She can feel like an abductee all the time, as a prisoner, an unwilling bride. She can go crazy, which we will get to in a little bit. She's influenced to be passive and compliant. So she's very easily dominated by others, and that can be very problematic for her. She has a lack of direction and drive, but of all the goddesses, she has the most possible routes for growth, which is exciting. So here's one of the issues, identifying with core. To live as the core is to be an eternal girl who doesn't commit herself to anything or anyone, because making a choice eliminates all the other possibilities, so she won't take a step in any direction. Such a woman feels as if she has all the time in the world and therefore can wait until something moves her. So if you remember in the Peter Pan story, Wendy is in Never Never Land, and she eventually has to make the decision to return and confront this. That's what Persephone also has to do. She has to make a choice to grow up. To grow, she must learn how to make commitments and fulfill them. She has difficulty saying yes and following through with what she has agreed upon. And growth requires that she struggle against indecisiveness. She has to make a choice. She has to struggle against being passive and inertia. She must make up her mind and stay committed even when her choice is no longer fun. Between the ages of 30 or 40, reality hits a woman who has maintained an identification with core hard. She will look around her life and realize that she's running out of time to have kids. She hasn't had a meaningful career, and she'll feel really different from other people her age. She hasn't not committed to anything for real. And she has also probably resisted marriage, whether she's married or not. But either way, she has resisted marriage because she sees it from the archetypal perspective of the maiden for whom the model of marriage is death. So Persephone is abducted by Hades, the death bringer, and brought down into the world of the dead. They're the unconscious. So sometimes a woman can have this in her psyche, this concept of marriage is the end of things for me. And a lot of men have that too. This is very different from Hera's model of marriage. Hera thinks that marriage is fulfillment. And Hera expects that a Zeus man will bring fulfillment. Being married brings fulfillment. However, in contrast, a Persephone woman has to resist the assumption that marriage is an abduction or death, something to be fought or resented. So some pitfalls, some problems for Persephone. So Persephone said she'd eaten the pomegranate seeds under duress. She lied to her mother because she didn't want to take responsibility. She didn't want to anger her mother, and she wanted to protect her image of good girl. So she gave the impression that she had no control over her fate and therefore could not be held accountable. But in doing so, she determined her own fate. She kind of messed it up for herself. Deviousness, lying, and manipulation are potential character issues for Persephone women. And they do so because they don't feel empowered. They don't feel assertive. They don't feel confident to just ask for what they want and need and get things done in their life directly. She feels powerless and dependent on others who are more powerful. And so she's going to learn to get what she wants indirectly. She may wait for good timing. She might use flattery. She may tell only part of the truth or may lie outright rather than directly confronting the other person. And they do this also because they want to avoid anger. They don't want others to get mad at them. And so they're kind of tiptoeing around people. They're afraid of conflict. Also, narcissism is a pitfall. They can become very anxiously fixated on themselves, lose their ability to relate to others. Their thinking is dominated by worrying about themselves. Do I look okay? Do I sound smart? She puts a lot of energy into makeup and clothes. She spends hours in front of the mirror. And people exist to give her feedback. So she's waiting for people to give her feedback about her to know that she's okay. Okay, so here's a cool image, right? Here's Hades and Persephone down in the underworld. In the underworld, Persephone was a sad maiden who didn't eat and didn't smile. That's how Hermes found her. Persephone women are susceptible to depression when they are dominated and limited by people who keep her bound to them. So people who are possessive of them. Because she is unassertive, she'll suppress her anger rather than express it. And she definitely won't actively change the situation. She becomes depressed with feelings of isolation, inadequacy, and self-criticism. So she sort of fades into the woodwork. She becomes depressed, she becomes more passive, and she doesn't access her emotions. She doesn't really know how she feels. She seems wispy, insubstantial. She doesn't eat, she doesn't have anything to say. It's like a flower fading. In contrast, a Demeter woman is very noticeable when she's depressed. She has a big effect on people around her, for better or worse. If depressed, she will make others feel guilty, powerless, and angry. And she implies that she's blaming them. That's how you know a Demeter woman from a Persephone woman. A Demeter woman will make you feel like it's your fault that she's depressed, and a Persephone will not. A depressed Persephone makes everyone around her feel cut off from her, and she's the one who feels guilty, powerless, and blameworthy. She might feel very, very guilty for something that she said, thought, or did. Some Persephones withdraw into a shadowy world of inner musings, images, and an imaginary life as an escape route. So if she has a really intrusive mother or an abusive father, sometimes she'll go into her own inner world to block out her parents. Sometimes her reality, like her lived experience in the world is so bad that she has to retreat. But this will cut her off from others and can become a prison. She can get stuck in this imaginary world that she has created. Withdrawing gradually from reality, some Persephones slip into psychosis. A psychosis is a state of mind in which you are caught in a world of symbolic imagery and esoteric meaning, with very disturbed perceptions of yourself and the world. And sometimes it's temporary. I mean, this is a classic example of this is a person who loses sense that they are who they are and thinks that they are Jesus or they're some other archetype. And they start to identify with an archetypal pattern rather than with the human that they are. And sometimes this is temporary and serves as a way to break out of limitations, allowing them greater access to a wider range of feeling, deeper awareness of themselves. But you can get caught and held in the underworld, staying in psychosis because reality is too painful. And that is a big problem. And that typically requires hospitalization and medication to recover from. After Persephone emerged from the underworld, Hecate was her constant companion. Hecate is the goddess of the dark moon and the crossroads. She rules over realms of sorcery and magic. Persephones who emerge from the underworld can gain the ability to intuit the symbolic meaning of events and awareness of the other dimension. So Persephones who go through a depression or go through an underworld experience can come out of that with a deeper awareness of the symbolic nature of life. They might have a deeper understanding of their dreams. They may have psychic abilities. All of this symbolizes having Hecate as a companion. Oh, that image is broken. Persephone women must wrestle with the core in order to grow. For example, they need to decide to marry. This is just an example. Not all Persephone women have to marry, but if they do decide to marry, they need to make the commitment for real. Or if they want to embark on a career, they have to do it for real and stay with it. They have to learn how to face life on their own and take care of themselves, like literally in all ways, support themselves, feed themselves, dress themselves. All these things have to be learned. Sometimes the first time in their life that they are independent is actually when they get divorced, because before that, they have always done what was expected of them. And only when they lack someone to do things for them or someone to blame can they grow. She can develop in several different directions that are the potentials of the archetype through activation of the other goddesses or by developing her animus. So she can develop as a Persephone, or she can also lean into her Artemis or lean into Hera or lean into Aphrodite or become an Athena, or she could also develop her masculine side. Lots of options for her. One option is, this is supposed to be an image of Persephone and Hades, by the way. I think it's a really cool picture. She can become a passionate sexual woman. So prior to becoming queen, she was sexually unresponsive. She either felt raped or merely compliant when having sex. Excuse me. But the potential of Persephone is to become connected to Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. So together, Aphrodite and Persephone were in love with Adonis. And so this connects them mythologically and symbolically. Persephone accepted those pomegranate seeds. She didn't have them forced on her, like she said to her mother. She accepted them, and that sealed her fate and ended her reign as the unwilling bride, and she became Hades' wife. In real life, after some years, a Persephone woman may stop perceiving the marriage as an abduction and her husband as her captor. She might begin to see him as a decent, vulnerable, but imperfect man who actually loves her. And she might become orgasmic at this point. They might start to have meaningful sex and view him as Dionysus, evoker of passion. Dionysus is like a god that a lot of people who are into symbolism say is very much like Hades. Like they're almost like two sides of the same coin. Another way to grow would be to uncover a capacity for ecstatic religious experience. So some women develop priestess-like qualities. They might become intoxicated by rituals. They might feel possessed by a goddess. They might speak in tongues. They might be using light language. This is another way to grow. A person who's a Persephone woman might also develop potential as a medium or a psychic. As a guide for mortals who visit the underworld to speak to the dead, Persephone had a function metaphorically similar to that of mediums. So a medium is a person who helps people communicate with loved ones that have passed away. And so Persephone is doing a similar function. Her personality is diffuse. What that means, diffuse personality, it means she is not easily defined. She is incredibly receptive and she lacks focus. In other words, she can see all things. She's not focused on one thing like Artemis and Athena and Hestia. All of these qualities make being a psychic much easier. So in order to she has to transcend the core identity to find her inner Hecate and Queen element that is unafraid of the uncanny, at home in the underworld and with symbolism, and knows when she is at a dangerous crossroad that she needs to seek a safer route. And lastly, she can grow by becoming a guide to the underworld. Once a woman descends into her own depths and doesn't fear returning to re-examine what's there, she can mediate between ordinary and non-ordinary reality. So once somebody has done the inner work, once somebody knows who they are on the inside and isn't afraid of that, isn't ashamed of that, then she can help others to kind of see inside themselves. She can have visions and numerous experiences and transmit what she's learned, becoming a guide for others. And she can become a therapist or a guide who can connect others with their own depths, guiding them to find symbolic meaning and understanding of what they find there. Examples of that are, people who teach other people how to be psychics, people who work with dream analysis. These are all examples of Persephone function. Okay, let me stop the share now. And I'm going to end the recording.